Hi, welcome. My name is Angelique, and today we're going to be talking about the moon sign of Gemini as it relates to astrology. And if it's your first time with me, I've been a student of astrology for over 30 years with a background in mental health and psychology and counseling. So I really love diving deep, getting to the psyche, uncovering any patterns, behaviors, but really using that for practical growth, for guidance. And astrology is not just used for prediction, but also as a way to look at our psyche, what's going on with us internally in our body. So I like to pull from mythology and symbolism, uh, elemental astrology, so the four elements, and ground it, bring it from the heavens down to earth. What does that mean for us practically? What are some things that we can do to either help any challenges that can bring up, or how can we be successful and be powerful? So that is my own personal practice with astrology. And so today I'm talking about Gemini moon. And I like to first look at the sign a little bit and break it down. So that's where that mythology comes in, that elemental astrology. And then compare that with the planet that we're talking about, or the whatever it is in the placement. So that's the moon. And we're going to put those together and see what personal growth, what practical steps we can learn about the moon in Gemini. And I'm going to be talking about it through the lens of the inner child. And we'll get more into what that really means, but our emotional world, our safety, what we feel at home, but also more darker parts of ourselves is where we can see what that might be looking at the moon sign in our natal chart. So, starting with the sign Gemini. Gemini is ruled by the planet Mercury, and Mercury is ruled with astrology by the Roman god of the same name, Mercury. He was known as the messenger of the gods. He was the chief messenger. So, any type of communication, whether that was local travel, goods, services, commerce, but also messages that needed to go to people, Mercury was that guy. He was the chief in charge. He ruled it. He organized it. So anything that was local or had to do with communication. So what I'm going to do is pull out and look at more what emotions would be ascribed to Mercury. And I talk more about the background and personality of Mercury if you want to listen on that. I have a Sun in Gemini episode. So I do more of the background of the gods there. But this, I'm going to just look at the emotions. So, what Mercury is known for in terms of an emotional context. So, with Roman mythology, what we know of Mercury is that he was very, very smart. There's a wittiness that comes to it because when you're ruling thoughts and ideas and you have to move quickly and you're organizing a lot of things, there's a high intelligence there. So, especially with Gemini, which is more air, which is going to be the logic, the thoughts, the ideas, things that we can't see, things that are intangible, that's going to really live in the mind. So, there's a huge analytical component that comes here. So when we're thinking of emotions, especially with the god of Mercury in Gemini, uh, the people who have these placements are going to emote in a way that's maybe more energetic, maybe more forward moving, more clear, more logical, and also more detached because, as I said, there's that um, focus on organization, on communication, ideas, and thoughts. And the mind is doesn't operate completely separate from emotions, but they are different functions, and we can see things logically, but not see them emotionally, and vice versa. So that's where we're kind of at odds with this position when we're thinking of the emotions. And so outside of the mythology, just the sign of Gemini is in the element of air. And as I said before, it's very swift energy, it's light, it's airy. So, taking that symbolism, you can really infer that people who have moon in Gemini, their emotions are going to take on that quality. They're going to be uh, they're going to be lighter, they're going to be quicker, going to be swifter. So any moods or emotions that come for people who have moon in Gemini, these emotions are going to come on very quick, but they also just might be lighter or more surface level, or there's a disposition to keep emotions light and more surface level. The sign of Gemini doesn't like emotions that are very deep, that take a long time to process, that might bring up some really heavy experiences. So, just like trauma that occurred in childhood, Gemini might be the sign more often to just kind of detach from that, not think about it, not want to really process it, or they might analyze it and then move on without actually feeling how that situation affected them. So, in an emotional context, Gemini is going to be really great with one on one, like friends, small groups, any dating, flirting, anything in any relationships. Gemini is going to really soar when it comes to these lighter engagements because that airiness is there. But because of the Mercury element, that we Gemini really wants information to be going back and forth at a rapid pace. Sitting and listening to someone talk for like an hour where you have to sit quietly and you can't give any information back and vice versa can be really challenging with this placement. So Gemini placements can get the bad rap of not being emotionally mature, or it can also just look like avoidance, detachment, cold. You might be considered cold, although I know that's not true. And Gemini moon people have emotions just like everyone else. They just might want to process them differently, look at them differently. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, but some things should be felt to appropriately um, move on to have a healthier clearing of emotions, to really be at peace with things. We can't ignore all the messy, deeper, darker details because then we might still be repeating patterns unconsciously, making mistakes time and time again that don't really serve us or are harming other people. So it's a catch 22. A lot of people of Moon and Gemini have almost no issue making friends. Networking, having great rapport with clients, coworkers, small groups. We see a lot of teachers that have this placement because they're processing information, they're going back and forth, especially if it's like preteen, teenager, early adulthood. We see a lot of the more youthful energy. It's the way that Gemini likes to emote is in a more youthful way. So geared to something that's more fun. That's how the emotions and feelings are to come up. If it's not fun, if it's super heavy, if it's depressing, that can be difficult. Another note about emotions with Gemini is that sign is can lead to overthinking or anxiety because of that fast-paced nature of thoughts, ideas. When we put it in our emotions, when we combine it, it can mean that emotions that come up can cause anxiety a lot more than all the other signs. So that's just something to be mindful of. And so now going to move on to the moon and what that really tells us about the inner child. In astrology, the moon represents motherhood, childbirth, young children. And so that's why it is often a point in the natal chart where we can find out a little bit about someone's upbringing, their childhood, their mother, but it doesn't just have to be mother, it can be anyone in the childhood the childhood environment. So caregivers, siblings, it can be that. But it is a way to examine what was being nurtured, if at all, and what maybe where nurturing was maybe lacking in people. So the moon with Gemini, oftentimes people who have these placements grow up with emotional depth being sidestepped or ignored or not really placed at high value. So what that looks like is a child that is going through, maybe there's something that occurs to them that is heavy or deep. So it's like a family member, grandparent passing, or maybe there's a big move. That can be unsettling and really daunting, especially if it's changing friend groups, if it's going somewhere that's going to be not ideal. And so, what that can look like is parents or caregivers kind of just brushing that off and not really focusing on the emotional content. So, the parents or caregivers of people with Moon and Gemini might really do well looking at things analytically and logically. So, with that example, say you're a child that has to move across the country, you have to leave everybody you know, you're going to be out of your comfort zone. Someone with Moon and Gemini, their parents might do really well to say, well, this is going to be good, and we're doing this because we have a job, and it's going to be better for you in all these other ways. But someone with Moon and Gemini in this scenario might really miss out on the emotional connection. So what we have for people with Moon and Gemini when they're children might be parents or parents or caregivers that really aren't checking in with how they're feeling about something, especially if it's a bigger life transition or change. So it might come down to, logically, this is why all of these things are happening and why these are changing. This person died that you were close to because they had this illness, and this is how you can prevent it. But there might not be open sharing of crying, of sad emotions, deeper emotions. There might not be really an acknowledgement of deep emotional nurturing. So softer or more intuitive might be missed out. And if that's the case, what I've seen, a lot of people who have Moon and Gemini might grow up and kind of avoid deeper, not as analytical ways to process things. So they might really look at all their emotions, understand what's going on. Like, oh, I'm angry because my boss told me off. And then they might just move on. So they might just write about it or talk about it or think it and just move on instead of sitting with it and really letting themselves embody this emotion. It also can be missing out on feelings of themselves and others that are maybe deeper or more intuitive, so not on the surface. People with Moon and Gemini might also grow up to not feel supported in big life changes or be unaware that maybe deeper support is okay and that is actually needed. They might, because Gemini is so in their own head, they might not notice, like, oh, maybe a hug would be good going through something sad. But there's not a direct analytical reason for why something like sharing a hug with someone would benefit you. So it can go both ways, that people with Moon and Gemini, when they have kids, they might have a harder time with deeper reflection of things, deeper emotions, really asking people and having deeper empathy in one-on-one situations with those deeper needs. So if this is the case, there's a couple of things we can do to help heal this part if you have Moon and Gemini. One way is through organizing. Gemini likes to organize, likes to plan, especially if it's on a smaller scale or it's ideas or something that's analytical. So maybe a career or a job that has organizing in it, or just setting aside time to do organizing. So scrapbooking, any hobbies where you're organizing your home or you're helping friends or children organize. Maybe you are an organizer in your community or in your family members. So maybe you're the person that's organizing trips and plan and parties, gatherings, things like that. That can really feed your inner child and kind of help declutter things intellectually, analytically. So then you can have that space to connect with people. People with Moon and Gemini also could really benefit from movement, especially if it ties to art or writing, speaking about anything that you've read or listened to. So anything to do with the media, if you were taking in information, it helps to then bring it back out or feed it back out because Gemini has that need of communication, knowledge, and sharing. They like a nice loop here. So with the moon, it can be very satisfying emotionally to you, especially as a stress relief, to maybe create art and then you post it on social media or you're part of an art group or and this can apply to book clubs, this can apply to writing, that you research and write something and then you share it, or it's just, maybe it's not research based, maybe it's like poetry or a short story or something. So anything that gets your mind moving and then maybe gets your body moving, hands moving, are great ways that you can help heal. And so that's what I have today for Moon Gemini. You have the capacity to feel deeply through art and media and writing and ideas and thoughts. So that's a skill that you have. So leaning into more of that can get you to access some of these subconscious emotions or things that you are not ready to talk about yet, and that can still help to process and heal. Okay. Thank you so much for listening. If you have this placement, I'd love to hear how this resonates for you. You can leave a comment below. Um, but otherwise, thank you so much for taking the time to listen and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye bye.